Today on Law Next, Smith.ai, the virtual receptionist service that combines live receptionists with artificial intelligence. We'll talk with Justin Maxwell, co-founder and chief design officer, and Maddy Martin, head of growth and education. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to the interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, on to this week's interview. Justin and Maddy, welcome to Law Next.
Hi there.
Thanks, Bob. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. Justin, let me start with you. Right there on the front of your website, it says Smith.ai is a superior receptionist service for live calls and website chat. What makes you superior?
It's a great question. A few things. So the landscape was fairly full in the virtual receptionist space when we started. And that's because there were a lot of people staffing call centers with really great people, or possibly great people, and scripts. And they were divided by cubicles, there's noise in the background, etc. And so when we started talking with small businesses, especially attorneys, financial advisors, and IT consultants, we start hearing we don't use services like that because they're not really designed for us. Those are call centers effectively. And so we started to understand their problem, and it was really not around answering the phones, it was more around qualification and knowing their customers. And so because my co-founder, Aaron, and I both have backgrounds in technology, I'm from Apple and Google, Aaron's from Google and Home Depot and many other companies as well. And so we said, all right, well, we can solve this on a technological basis. We can bring AI into it. We can bring better training for our receptionists into it. We can bring better integrations with the platforms that these professionals use. So what makes us superior is essentially a technological foundation that helps us answer calls light years beyond script-based staffing solutions, qualify callers, book appointments for them, take payments, do the full intake. And meanwhile, we're piping all that data into the firm's CRMs. We're integrating with any sort of calendaring software that they might need, things like that. That just goes a lot further than anybody just answering phone calls for you.
So what's the difference? I mean, Maddy, what do you see as the difference between the kind of call center that Justin just talked about and the virtual receptionist service that you offer?
Well, I think that people are very aware when they're talking to someone who is following a script versus someone who has the both intelligence and ability to, on a discretionary basis, handle a call based on what's happening in the flow of the call. So not everything is going to follow a script so clearly, and people, especially when they have legal issues or financial matters they want to discuss, it's not always so easy to just follow a basic decision tree. So I think that what we bring is the really excellently trained, deeply steeped backgrounds in customer service, hospitality, people who know how to handle not only any sort of call, but also calls that are really sensitive in nature. People who are calling attorneys, they have sensitive, situations going on. Maybe there's been an accident, or there's a divorce, or, a child custody matter, or immigration. There are a lot of sensitive, emotionally driven topics that come up. So the person needs to be a professional and intelligently handle a call and understand fundamentally what the purpose is of each call. Is it to qualify a lead? Is it to make a client happy? Is it to address a concern? And then from there, what's the next step in the workflow? And I think that's where we come in and have these automatic prompts. Imagine that the receptionists have this kind of AI backbone. They're part human, part machine because of the software that they're using. They make good decisions, and then they have the tools at their fingertips to pass that information into the small business software or look up information very quickly to facilitate the end game of that call. So for example, if we're working with an attorney client and they only work in certain counties, people, may not know their county, but they know their zip code. We can have a receptionist type in a zip code, match it to a county, and immediately say, yes, this is one the attorney practices in. Let's move forward with scheduling your consultation, instead of having that receptionist just say, I don't know, or say, let me Google that for you, with varying results of different accuracy. It allows them to have like everything basic taken off of their brain so that they can just focus on serving that person really well and tapping into the software for the answers that are accurate every single time.
Yeah, so actually, Maddy, you made a great point about that adjunct AI brain, which is, it's not only just the basics, certainly things like zip codes or area codes we can use to help qualify callers, but there's so many different types of phrasing that a caller might use to indicate whether or not it's in the practice area of the professional. And so if you're doing a script-based service, then unless the caller says the words child custody, you might not know it's a child custody case. They could say a lot of things, but we actually can help detect those phrases that people are using over the course of the conversation and say that this looks like they're calling about a child custody case, even though they haven't used those words. Therefore, the caller is qualified.
So, Justin, when I think about, if I were to just think generally about the idea of a receptionist service using AI, I might think that there's, kind of a bank of automatons, I can't even say it, sitting there answering calls. And that's not what you're doing at all. I mean, expand on how the AI feeds into this.
Sure. And that's a great question because, as Maddy mentioned, a lot of these calls are sensitive, so it needs to be just between the caller and the receptionist having this conversation. And so in those cases, the receptionist is actually working with our interface to teach it about the call, just to essentially clicking and pointing and clicking on things, occasionally typing a few words that the caller might say, and the computer that the receptionist is using to answer the calls is giving them guidance in how they're going to handle that call as it goes. So it's kind of, there's a couple conversations happening. There's a conversation between the caller and our receptionist, and there's also the receptionist interacting with this foundational software that we've built to help guide them in the conversation.
So I guess from the customer point of view, what's important here is that to the extent there's AI at operation here, at play here, it's behind the scenes. It's not something your customers would be aware of or that their callers would be aware of.
That's a great question, and I would say the answer is yes, but. And the but is in our web-based chat. So we also have a chat widget that a lot of firms are putting on their website, and it's using that same AI to answer questions from website visitors. So just as we've trained the AI to help our receptionists, we're certainly not going to have AI answer phone calls. The world isn't at that place yet, and it's not a familiar way of interacting with people. But on websites, it's a little bit different. So if you go to a law firm's website and say, hey, I'd like to get an appointment, or do you offer free consultations? Well, certainly our AI can answer that as good as any human can, and it's only when they start asking questions that are beyond the capabilities of our system that we say, hang on one moment, let's see if we can get someone to help you out.
Yep. Maddy, who needs your service?
Well, I think beyond just small businesses in general, the people who get the most value out of the service are the people who have the most specialized skills, and also a fairly high hourly rate, to be totally honest with you. Because if you look at, I'm an econ major, so I always think about things in terms of opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And opportunity cost is greatest when your hourly rate is greatest. I mean, you're giving up the most time value, right? So if you charge an hourly rate and you're spending your time answering calls from people who may or may not even be qualified leads, that is not the best use of your time. Now, the problem is, especially for solo and small firm attorneys, they meet the criteria of, having a high hourly rate, but they're very limited in their bandwidth and they have a lot on their shoulders. So we often say, like, are you laboring or lawyering? Well, the most valuable thing you could spend your time on is lawyering. And what you can offload to software and services is this immediate answering and qualification step, whether it happens by phone or on your website, to say, here are a few basic questions that we need to ask. Here's some things, some information we can provide to the caller or the website visitor to help them self-qualify and evaluate if they're the right client for this firm. And then once that happens, take the next appropriate step. So not only are we taking off that initial call answering or chat response off that person's plate, but we're also saying, here's the next step in the workflow. We can schedule a consultation. We can take payment if you require that for consultations. And then we can take basic intake information. So if we're doing those things, then you get so much more value. And you know that when you have a callback or a consultation scheduled on your calendar, that it's going to be with someone who is likely to be worthwhile of your time because they've already been pre-qualified, or it's an existing client, right? But it allows you to better utilize your time because maybe you are the one who should be selling, and then you have to do a conflict check, and you'll do, your engagement letter after that call. But that allows you to cut down on all these tasks that don't actually require your direct involvement, but are quite easy and affordable to set up.
I know there's a number of industries that you work in, but within legal, are we talking mostly about smaller firms that are going to be right for you, or do I have that wrong?
No, we typically are. We're talking about, solo and small firms, increasingly with website chat. I can see it being applicable to, small to medium firms, but really our bread and butter has always been helping out people who have everything on their shoulders. And just because you're a solo attorney doesn't mean you have to go it alone. There are a lot of other great services that we often recommend, from virtual paralegals and bookkeepers. We're not doing paralegal work. And we're also not an assistant who is going to go and run over to the courthouse for you. But we can do an unbelievable amount of work on your behalf to keep your responsiveness up while you get work done. Because I think the fundamental dilemma that we help solve for attorneys is that they're faced with people who are contacting them. And we know from the Clio Legal Trends report that 2 out of 3 potential clients determine their attorney they're going to hire based on that attorney's initial responsiveness to their first call or email. So we know that initial responsiveness matters more than anything else. But you can't afford to have all these interruptions that on average consume 2 hours of your day. So how do you remain responsive while also getting work done? Like, that is that fundamental dilemma that we address.
Justin, I think you started this, about 3 years ago? Do I have that right?
Yeah, we started this in June 2015.
And I know you talked a little bit about some of the reasons for why, how you would distinguish this from some of the other sort of just call answering services out there. But what need in particular did you see that you felt wasn't being addressed by other services that were available?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think part of my training as a product designer has been to listen to more to what the customers tell us they need than think that my own intuition is the right solution for them. I think you see a lot of problems in tech where someone comes up with a brilliant idea that nobody actually needs. Yeah. And so what happened was that, yeah. So what happened was that Aaron and I originally had an idea for a slightly different product. And we started working on that. And one of the ways that we were going to monetize that product was by making life easier for these independent contractors, attorneys, real estate agents, and so on. And anyone that fits the description Maddy talked about, where just the world is on their shoulders for their business. And so as we were working on that bigger thing, the first feature that we built for it was this call answering service. And that really blew up. So we just expected that to be one of many things that we did, but people just started latching on to that, saying, this is amazing. This is exactly what I've always wanted. Could you just make it do this? And can you just make it do this one more thing? And so we have 3 years of just making it do that one more thing, and it's turned into this incredibly robust platform, and we've abandoned the original thing that we set out to do because this is what everyone actually wanted.
Very interesting. Stay with us. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a few moments to talk more with Justin Maxwell and Maddy Martin. Welcome back to Law Next. This is Bob Ambrogi, and we're talking with Justin Maxwell, the co-founder and chief design officer of Smith.ai, as well as Maddy Martin, head of growth and education at Smith.ai. And Maddy, given that you're the head of education, let me ask you, what's the most common misconception or misunderstanding that the legal market has about virtual receptionist services?
I think that it's just that it's an answering service. One of the things that we do very well, in addition to now live website chat, is also outbound calls. And we handle a lot of workflows through smart integrations with your services. So, one of the things that really addresses the needs of attorneys that may not immediately be recognized with a, call answering umbrella is that you have people who are completing website forms, and that's maybe triggering an email to you or it's getting logged in your CRM. We actually have our clients forwarding those completed forms to us so that we can immediately call them back. So you get that responsiveness and also this friendly person on the phone who can ask questions and qualify that lead so that it's not something waiting on your to-do list at the end of the day when you get time to it or when you're back from court. Maybe they've already, and very likely they've already engaged another attorney who was more responsive. So it allows us to be very proactive in that way. Also, I would say that a lot of attorneys are not necessarily aware that services like these are flexible to their needs. So you can increase or decrease your call volume by month, or if you have a marketing campaign running, all of our receptionists are available to you at any time. We don't just dedicate a team. So let's say that you ramp up your marketing. We don't need extra time as other receptionist services might if they've dedicated, let's say, 2 or 3 people to answer your calls. Any of our receptionists are able to answer your calls because of the sophistication of our software. So we don't need that training time. We don't need to say, hey, hang on for your marketing campaign, which is not really a good experience when you're paying someone for a specialized service. And the third thing I would say is also, you don't necessarily need to have us, handle all of your calls or website chats ad nauseum on every page of your website. What actually we can do is we can handle your overflow calls, or we can handle chats only on the highest, converting pages on your website. You can limit it so that it meets your budget and so that it best addresses those most qualified leads that you have.
Justin, what does this look like? I mean, I've just signed up with you, and the first call comes in. What happens in that call? How do you handle that?
So when you sign up with us, there's 2 different ways. Let's just say when you sign up with us, we get to know you a bit, and we can get to know you through you just filling out a form and telling us a bit about your business, or you scheduling a call with our onboarding team. So either way, it's never going to be some sort of cold start. We have to know who we're answering calls for and what type of calls they're going to be, what you want us to do on those calls. And so
I can't just go to your website and fill out a form and get started. I need to talk to somebody there.
No, so we have 2 ways of doing it. You either do fill out a form or you talk to someone. But either way, if you're going to fill out that form, you're going to tell us a bit about your firm, the kind of clients you want, the kind of clients you don't want, what you want us to do with good calls, what you might want to do if someone from the court calls, what you might want to do if a sales call, like some people like AVO, some people don't, things like that. So you tell us just a bit about the general practice. And then we start answering calls for you, and we can do things like schedule appointments for qualified callers. We can take payment for people who might owe you money for previous work or for consultations. And once we take that call, the most basic thing we do is we put it into a summary, and we send it to you either by email or by text message or Slack notification. And then things can start getting a little bit more advanced. We can integrate with your CRM, so we can push customer records to your Lexicata inbox, for example. And then we could start getting even more involved in your practice. Like, we could set up conference calls. So we have numerous attorneys that have us set up conference calls with them, and judges have set up conference calls with them, and mediation sessions, things like that. So we start working on your behalf, and at the end of every one of these things, we're going to send you a summary of it for your records, and we also will send you a summary at the end of the day. So I think that's the general flow of things. I hope that describes it. But then as you see this feedback loop continue daily, you start recognizing things that are working for you and things that aren't. So you might start saying to us, actually, in these specific cases, I want you to handle this a little bit differently. If this person calls, they're a VIP, I want them to ring through straight to me, not even go through your receptionists.
What about the process of qualifying leads? Maddy, maybe you could talk a little bit more about how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a good opportunity for me to say, it's all very customized. I mean, we can make basic recommendations to folks who have not outsourced this and need a little bit of guidance or handholding, but typically how you qualify leads, and maybe you haven't written down the actual questions that you ask, and you just, wing every call, but they typically go the same way. We will take those.
I would think that would be a real concern for a lot of solo and small firm lawyers about using a service like this, is they feel like they have, they've sort of personalized their routine to some extent.
Right,
they've customized
and that they're going to
routine
fit within, I think that people think they're going to fit within our framework, and that's like totally the opposite. We fit in within your framework. And if you look at some of the reviews, like, I don't mean to be a tacky marketing person or whatever, but this is true. Like, if you look at the Trustpilot reviews, well, it's like, just don't take my word for it. I mean, people are actually saying this on Trustpilot. One of the most common comments, and I hear this anecdotally, in person, I go to a lot of events, is that people are shocked by how much we customize our call handling, our chat handling through the receptionist and through our software based on their needs. There's this assumption that if I'm a solo, I'm going to get the bare bones, basic, somewhat freemium model of fit into our construct and just gulp it down and it'll be good enough for you. It'll get you 80% there. But that's really not the case. This is a super premium service for each individual client that we work with, and many of them are individuals. So if you qualify your clients a certain way, or if you take payment, or if you say the first 30 minutes of a consult is free and then it's paid after that, we take all of this information and we relay it back to the people who are contacting you. And we will ask these questions, maybe 5-10 questions. I often recommend, beyond contact information, we see that people are asking, obviously, if location is an issue, we ask about that. But then just the nature of the matter they're talking about, maybe even questions that don't necessarily qualify, but capture information at the right time. So when someone's first contacting you, it's really important to ask, how did they hear about you? Because maybe you have referral programs in place with other firms. So it's not just about the lead, it's also about how the lead found out about you, making sure we're gathering all the information that's relevant, both from a qualification perspective, but also from a marketing perspective. Maybe you're spending money on channels and you want to know, through us answering your calls or even through website chats, who do I credit for this source of the lead? That can be just as important as the lead information themselves. So we take a very holistic approach.
Yeah, Maddy brought up a few great, actual use cases as she was describing that. I think in terms of our flexibility, there's a few things that come to mind. And one is we represent a very busy firm that wants to have all of their new client consultations distributed evenly. So we can randomly distribute client calls to each of the 3 attorneys when people call in. And so the receptionist isn't even aware of that process. All they do is click, book appointment, and then we take care of the actual nuts and bolts of the booking for them. so that the receptionist doesn't have to make that decision. And then another one we're able to say, if the caller fits this type of personality type, if they seem anxious or worried, book it with this attorney. But if they seem like they're being strategic, or if they've planned ahead, please book it with this attorney. So we can do those sorts of things. But then one thing we didn't really get into is we end up doing a lot of live transfers, and we can do sequential attempts on that. So a lot of firms handle things differently depending on whether someone is a new lead or an existing client. And within that, there might be highly qualified leads and just potential leads. And so if someone calls in, they might just be like, that's exactly the type of client that you're looking for. You've got a lot of openings in your schedule right now, and so we might try you first. We might try making a live hot transfer to you, see if you're available, and if you're not, we might try your paralegal instead, and then as the last resort, we'll still book them on your calendar. And so we can use the criteria we have to make those decisions instead of just saying, gosh, everything about you sounds perfect, I'm going to take a message and send this off to the attorney. And by the time the attorney gets that message, you might have still called another firm. So we do everything we can to try to keep you hot and on the calendar for that attorney.
You are not the only virtual receptionist service catering to the legal profession. Again, I'll underscore that by saying that you're also serving a lot of other industries. But within legal, you're certainly not the only one out there. And one thing you've done is taken, I think, a different approach to pricing than some of the other well-known services. So explain how it is that you price your services and how that differs from what some others are doing.
Sure. I definitely want to answer this from my perspective, and then Maddy should offer her take on it too, because she came into it after we made the decision, but she's got a lot more on the ground experience with feedback from attorneys about it. So again, starting back to what I said about how we just built this for what our potential clients were asking for, we kept on hearing from them that one of the reasons they weren't using existing services was that the pricing was not aligned with the success of their business. So when you have a per minute pricing system, it's in your best interest to keep those calls short because you are on a limited budget, but it's in the best interest of the answering service to keep those calls long to make money from you. And they can say things like, we try to keep the calls efficient, we only charge per 30 seconds, things like that. But ultimately, the more time those calls make, the more money they make. And so that's why you see a lot of these services charging you for spam calls, charging you for sales calls, and offering these fake statistics like our average call length is only 1 minute. And it's like, yeah, well, because 40% of your calls are spam. And so we said, well, the only way that we can really provide a service that's aligned with the success of the business is to not make the businesses worry about the quality of these calls. We have to say, we are going to do an amazing job on these calls no matter how long they take. So to do that, we have to price them per call. And we just, over the past 3 years, we've started to get a really good feel for the average length of a call and how much we should charge for those calls depending on the volume of the firm. And so what we find is that the more calls a firm gets, the more efficient we can be. And so the pricing can come down in the hundreds of call volumes, for example. But the firms know that they're going to have an average load of calls per month that might fluctuate a little bit over the year, but in general, it's a fixed amount. And they can just really see that they have a very predictable expense for acquiring new clients over the course of the year.
Maddy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, what I want to add is that as attorneys are also getting a lot more savvy and dipping their toe into new marketing channels, and historically a lot of firms have relied heavily on referrals, and now folks are getting pretty savvy with SEO and paid search ads and maybe even some social media paid advertising. When you're paying per minute, it's very hard to determine the cost of acquiring a new client or even a new lead, because you're paying for that click, you're paying for this action, maybe a form submittal, and then you have a call that's happening, and it may take a varying length of time depending on who you're speaking with. Some calls are short, some are long. Who knows if the shorter or longer calls are converting? It's just a lot of information. It's apples to oranges. So if you're someone who is exploring new marketing channels, if you're someone who's paying close attention to your costs of acquiring new clients as you're expanding beyond just referrals, then if you have per call and per chat pricing, it allows you to much more clearly determine the cost of acquiring a new client.
So you have virtual receptionist service, you have website chat service, and you also offer a cloud phone system. Justin, can you just explain what that is about?
Sure. So I'd say for the first 2 years, we find that easily, 80% of our customers were using RingCentral or Google Voice as an intermediary between their customers and us. So they'd have, at some point, someone had advised them, hey, get a cloud-based phone number so that you can change it any time and route it according to your schedule. And they set it up. And so then what we started to see is just this constant overflow of tech support from these services to us, where they'd say like, well, I'm using RingCentral, but I really don't know how to use it. Or I'm using Google Voice, but it can't do these things I want it to do. And we realized that we're not tech support for those companies. So we just built our own. And it's certainly, it's better than Google Voice in a lot of ways, and it's easier to use than RingCentral in a lot of ways, and it covers 80 to 90% of the use cases for a lot of these firms, basically being you can have a phone number in the cloud, we can route it to your office during on the weekends, we can route it to our receptionists during the work days, we can create IVRs, which are menu systems. So we have a lot of the mid-sized firms who are working with us might have press 1 for new clients, press 2 for existing clients, and pressing 1 might route it to our receptionist, pressing 2 might just send it straight to voicemail for them, all sorts of things like that. But essentially that just took the workload off of us in providing support for these other systems. And as it's grown, we've just seen a lot of firms adopt it because of its, just like Smith.ai, very simple pricing model.
Can I get all this stuff wrapped up in a single package for a single price? Chat, receptionist, phone?
Maddy, would you like to answer that?
We offer discounts if you select more than one service.
Yeah.
And
Right.
also actually brand new for us this year is that we're offering annual discounts. So, not only are we able to provide, discounts for, very affordable pricing at the outset, but based on higher call volume, you'll receive a lower price. Also, based on an annual commitment, you'll receive 15% off. So that's one benefit. If you sign up for 2 services, you get a discount. If you sign up for all 3, you do get a discount. So, we try and make it as accessible as possible. One of the other things that I will mention is that we have a special code for your users, your listeners. And if they use code LawNext50, that's LawNext50, they'll get $50 off either the receptionist or chat service their first month.
Oh, that's great. LawNext50 for $50 off. You integrate with a number of different third-party applications, and I'm wondering if there are any in particular, not necessarily names of products, but are there types of products that you encourage your customers to use to maximize what they get out of Smith.ai?
Yes, absolutely. And there are actually a couple things that I want to say here, like especially for attorneys, because first of all, let me just answer the question and then I'll go a little bit deeper. So the first thing is, yes, I recommend CRMs and calendars at the outset. It's really important that you log the information, the contact information and the call summary notes if it's a receptionist call, or the chat transcripts if it's a web chat, in your system of record, right? In your database. And that can be, Clio or Practice Panther or HubSpot or Infusionsoft, whatever it is. And more, there's overlap between these like records databases and your marketing automation and intake software, right? So like Lawmatics and Lead Docket and, now Lexicata is now Clio Grow. But those systems, so once a new lead comes in, there's this workflow that's prompted, and maybe it triggers an email drip campaign to leads who didn't convert to nurture them into new clients, right? And those things can be prompted through automations that are pretty incredible because it takes even more work off your plate, and that follow-up happens automatically. Now, in addition to the calendaring, I also say payments, LawPay, HeadNote, whatever you're using to manage the payments for your firm. That's very easy. It's typically a landing page, and the receptionist has access to that to enter contact information and credit card information, even now like ACH and eChecks. But what I would say here is that for folks who are concerned about confidentiality and the ethics of using these systems and the professional responsibility rules that we adhere to, not only do the receptionists sign NDAs, but they also never have login access to any of these systems. And this is really where the tech comes in, and it's often overlooked, and it's often something that we don't bring up during these sorts of conversations. But I really want to emphasize it because I hear it in person as a concern. If you're evaluating a receptionist service or any sort of outsourced system, maybe if you have a dedicated virtual paralegal, you have some sort of arrangement in place where they need a login to one of your systems of record, but we do not log in. Like the receptionist will never personally log into these systems. That all happens automatically in the back end. So the information that we are collecting is automatically put through to these systems, which keeps it secure. There's no reading of information. There's no taking of information on our end. It's only putting into your system. For example, we can only schedule appointments. We can't change existing appointments in your calendar. We can't see what you're doing for the rest of the day. We just see when you're available and we book accordingly. So what I'm saying is, it should raise a red flag if anyone is asking you for like your login information. And it's not necessary to provide that level of access thanks to the APIs and the integrations that are accessible now through these really phenomenal software programs that attorneys are using.
And just before we leave that topic of integrations, you guys recently announced that you have a Zap on Zapier. You want to just quickly explain what that is?
I'll
Sure.
let Justin do that.
Yeah.
We are gigantic Zapier nerds here, and we found that we're using it to be the glue between our own system and just the hundreds of other things that we do. So we started digging into it to understand how we could use Zapier to just make life a lot easier for our customers. Because as Maddy was talking about, we do integrate with tons of CRMs, but there's always going to be hundreds or thousands of things that people want us to do that we can't keep up with, and that's Zapier's core business. So I've said all this assuming that someone on the listening to this actually even knows what Zapier is. So Zapier is the Rosetta Stone for APIs, and APIs are the ways that software can talk to each other. So you might use a CRM for your business to keep track of all your customer records, to keep track of all your appointments. You might also use Smith.ai. Zapier is going to be the intergalactic translator between those two things. And so we have built a Zap, as they call it, that says whenever a call comes in to Smith.ai or whenever we make a call, we can pass a bunch of data about that call, including the time of the call, whether it was inbound or outbound, the details of it, the phone number, the person, etc., to Zapier, and then Zapier can pass that information to anything that you are using or doing or can imagine. And so we've seen everything from the most simplistic and mundane, like whenever a call comes into Smith.ai, insert into my CRM that Smith.ai might not support yet. And we've also seen people do things like blinking the LED on their phone. or blinking the lights in their office whenever they get a high priority call. And so Zapier takes care of all the crazy stuff, and all we do is pass it the data. So it does require some knowledge on the client's part to know how to get deep into this product, but we at least provide the data that they might need to do that.
Yeah, and there's a good blog post on our website actually that not only overviews or provides an overview of the app that we have, but also one of Smith.ai's clients is Connor Malloy at Tri-City Legal, and he has a landlord law firm, and he actually has a computer science background, but has instituted a lot of automations leveraging heavily on Zapier. And I encourage you to read that blog post and links to not only an article that he wrote for our blog earlier last year, but also an interview that he did with a really popular HubSpot podcast host, and a few other resources that for people who are interested in getting into building their own Zaps and things like that, I think they'll find really useful.
Justin or Maddy, is there a short answer to what probably would require a long answer? But for a lawyer listening to this who's just not sure whether his or her firm is right for a virtual receptionist service, or isn't quite sure how to evaluate different virtual receptionist services, what's your best advice to them?
I think Maddy should answer that. Yeah.
My best advice is to do a 10-call free trial. I mean, that is why we offer that for two reasons. One, for the reason you're identifying, and then also to make sure that we propose a plan that works for you. And even though, yes, we're saying you can complete this form, you're always in contact with a real human being on our onboarding team, on our support team. So we want you to be successful. That's why we exist as a business. So do the 10-call free trial. The $50 code stacks on top of that. So you get a very accessible price from the outset, enough time to determine if this is something that's going to help you. And I think that you'll find, however you fit us into your business, that it frees you up to do more of what you love and why you started your firm or your IT consultancy or financial advisory firm. And that results in you being a lot happier and also having better work-life balance. So it's not all just about these costs that we're talking about. It's also about the quality of your life and your work.
I want to add to that. So my co-founder has this saying he loves to use, which is that people can't do math. And one of the reasons we're so popular with financial consultants and tax advisors is they really can, and they can see the bottom line and how Smith plays into that. And so what we might find, you're talking about these attorneys who might not know why a virtual receptionist might be good for them, not know whether it's worth the expense. I think a lot of it really just comes down to the opportunity cost and your own hourly. And so at the end of the day, it's not just the $5 to $7 that you're going to spend per call. It's the number of interruptions you're going to experience in your day and the best use of your time. So if you're spending most of your time on billable hours and you're offloading the client qualification to us, you're running a smarter and more efficient business. And I think that's really the ultimate sales point, is that this aspect of your job can be outsourced to a firm. And if you're going to choose a firm, we believe that we're probably the most capable ones to be doing that work for you.
Is the goal for new customers that they eventually outgrow you?
That's a really good question. We've seen both. So, and we feel great about it. So we've seen some firms have grown in size to where they were actually able, it might have just been someone working from a small office part-time, and then they joined up with a few other attorneys and got an actual space and have a full-time in-house receptionist to actually greet walk-ins and appointments. But then we've also seen a few of those come back because that person's now spending most of their time greeting people, and so they use us for those overflow calls. And in other cases, we've seen firms grow large enough in size to where they start using us more for outbound and for other types of coordination type calls and for advertising campaigns, but they have a direct line or another in-house receptionist for some of their existing clients.
That's also a way that web chat comes in, because even if you have a receptionist and you're using us for overflow calls only, or for certain outbound calls, it's not necessarily the case that that person is also going to be able to be, at their desk, responding to web chats. I talk to a lot of attorneys who have installed chat software on their website with the expectation that they will staff it themselves or someone at their office will staff it. And typically there are too many directions that people in the office are pulled in that initial expectation doesn't meet with the structure required to reliably, be responsive on those channels. And I think that's another way that we grow with firms, is that, yes, things are maybe working okay right now, or they're good, but they're not super sustainable, and they don't set you up for, capturing as many leads as you could, because things come up and people fall through the cracks. So what we help you do, we were talking initially about how do we qualify leads and how do you make that initial handoff if you've never outsourced this sort of thing before. Taking the time to put that structure in place sets you up for running a better business. It also sets you up for more consistently handling your communications. And that sets you up for better reviews and more consistent, client engagement, more consistent lead engagement and qualification, so that you have real processes in place and you're not just handling things on your own when all the onus is on you. So it just allows you to set up for better business growth. And if that means that your business continues with us, I think more and more we will continue to be on live web chat, even if you have in-house people who are able to handle your phone calls.
Well, before we wrap up, Justin, any last words?
No, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you.
It's been great to have you. And Maddy, how about you? Any concluding thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I would just encourage people to contact us. If you have questions, we love to work with you. And as I said, we customize every client's directions, and we're happy to kind of be consultants for you and figure out what the best solution is. So email us, hello at Smith.ai, or give us a call, and you'll hear our receptionists. They answer our phones, and we have our own website chat on our site. So you can, put us through the ringer. I encourage you to do so.
Well, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure to speak with both of you today. We've been talking to Justin Maxwell, the co-founder and chief design officer, and Maddy Martin, the head of growth and education at Smith.ai. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thanks
so much.
This is Bob Ambrogi. This has been Law Next. Thanks for listening.